Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. Just bear with me one moment. I'm going to share my screen. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right part of my screen. Okay, can everyone see my PowerPoint? Okay, great. My mind goes a million miles a minute, and so I like to use a PowerPoint to keep me focused, as well as, gives you guys something to look at and kind of round out what we're talking about. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started then. Just to introduce myself, I'm Christine Rai, as Dottie said. I'm an English professor at nearby Frederick Community College. I've been a teacher of one kind or another for 20 years now, and I specialize in experiential learning, culture, and food studies. I like English because I say you can read, write, and research about anything. And on the side, I also lead talks, tours, and trips. Sometimes day trips, sometimes trips abroad. I've led a couple trips for my college to Italy and France that were a lot of fun. And I've actually, as I was saying to Maria before we got started, I've given this talk a bunch of times in person at local Soleado lavender farm. And so I would encourage you, once all this COVID stuff is settled down and the farm is open again, you might like to go check them out if you haven't been yet. I also write about food, travel, and teaching, which are three of my big passions in life, at christinerai.com. So I always like to tell people what you can expect out of the session. So we're going to start off with some basic lavender facts to kind of build a good foundation. We'll zip through this history of lavender and humanity, which are really intertwined. And then we'll talk quickly about lavender lore, some sort of folk beliefs and folk remedies. We'll talk about the science of lavender and how that has supported a lot of these traditional uses and folk beliefs. And I have some stuff to kind of close up with. I love giving people resources to explore. So if what we talk about tonight kind of sparks your imagination and makes you curious, I have a few things that you can check out on your own if you want to learn more. And I'm going to do my best to stay on track with time. So my presentation hopefully will last 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. And if anybody has a more in-depth question, I'm happy to hang around a little bit after the presentation's over, and you can feel free to ask me the question then and not feel rushed. Sound good? Okay, great. And this is being recorded, so if you find I'm moving too slowly or you get up to get a drink and you miss something, don't worry, you can access it later. So just to kind of give us an introduction for lavender, I want to do something a little bit different to start because, normally I'm giving this at a lavender farm outdoors. So indulge me for a moment. If everybody could take a deep breath in, deep breath out. And I want you to, if you're comfortable, close your eyes. Keep breathing deeply. And now I want you to pretend, let your imagination run wild a little bit. Pretend that you're not sitting in your house, in your living room or your kitchen, wherever you are, but you're sitting in a chair and you're in a field of lavender. And you can feel the warm sun on your skin. You can hear the breeze, maybe some chirping birds. And most importantly, you can smell that delightful smell, the smell of lavender. Okay, so let's get started. The thing I want us to keep in mind tonight is that the history of lavender is the history of humanity, as the title of this talk suggests. It spans civilizations, centuries, and continents. Our connection with this special plant is vast, universal, and ancient. And interestingly enough, it's both primal and affirmed by modern science. And lavender features in music, poetry, history, folklore, and religion across all of these time spans and belief systems. So it's a very special plant to humanity. So some basic facts about lavender. Lavender, of course, as all plants did, started off as a wild plant, originally probably growing somewhere in the Middle East, particularly the Mediterranean region. Many people state that lavender comes from the Latin word lavare, meaning to wash, because of its use for personal hygiene and laundry, but a little more digging around about Roman bathing traditions suggests that actually they didn't use it for that traditionally, and they think it actually comes from the Latin livendula, which means bluish. Another interesting thing about lavender, in addition to the etymology and where it came from, is that it's technically a member of the mint family, Lamaceae, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, and it includes other aromatic plants like thyme, salvia, and mint. So I have brought from my garden a Lamaceae bouquet. It's a little dim in here. You can see here, this is a salvia. It's a Japanese shiso. It's a Japanese culinary herb. It's in the perilla family. Here I have some thyme, good old mint, sage, and also rosemary. And an interesting thing about plants in this family, I'm going to look like I'm in a jungle here for a minute, and here's our friend lavender, is if you take the stem of these plants in this family and you roll them between your fingers, like so, you will notice that the stems feel blocky, whereas most plants, I'm going to pick this off of my house plant here. Don't worry, it needed to be taken off anyway. It's kind of rounded, right? Most plants have round stems. So the plants in this particular family, they have these sort of blocky, squarish stems. So when you roll it, you can kind of catch it on your fingers a little bit. So those of you that have an herb garden, you might like to try this experiment sometime. The other thing that all those plants have in common is they're quite fragrant and aromatic, and many of them are used for essential oils and cooking and other good stuff. Lavender, really, it has at this point about 20 different species with hundreds of genotypes. What that means is that these genotypes affect how large the plant grows, what the leaves look like, the color of the flowers. Now, lavender, like the photo you see there on my PowerPoint, is of course traditionally that beautiful purple or blue, some people would say. But there's actually also white lavender, and there's also yellow lavender. And some varieties are more fragrant, and some are larger, and so on and so forth. Lavender is often called the queen of medicinal plants, and in a moment when we start the sort of historical exploration of its uses, you'll see why. And its history stretches back to really the beginnings of human history, about 3,000 years or so. So let's start at the beginning. I'm going to zip through this historical stuff. Like I said, this is being recorded, so if you want to go back and check anything later, you'll be able to once it's uploaded to YouTube. So with the sort of cradle of civilization also comes the cradle of lavender's relationship with humanity. And some historians believe that lavender first was domesticated in ancient Arabia for stress relieving, sleep inducing, and antimicrobial properties. Does this sound familiar to you? Those are pretty much three of the big modern uses for lavender as well. And with, of course, the movement of conquering and trade from ancient Mesopotamia into Spain in particular, eventually the Arabs brought their traditions with them, including their medical traditions, to Spain, the use of lavender. And some say that this is where lavender began its spread to Europe. In addition to those medicinal uses, it was used for cooking, for bathing, and for personal fragrance. And the ancient Mesopotamians were the ones that created the technology to distill the oil. I have a bottle of lavender oil here from Soleado. And it's the same basic technology that we use today. So this is truly an ancient example of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. because we still use those distilleries today. And throughout the presentation, you know, I'm an English professor, so I like to find quotes. And I also like, when we're talking about history, to hear from those voices from the past, right? Instead of my perspective as a modern person. So here's a quote about lavender from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, you came here, you strained, you toiled. What can I give you as you return to your land? Let me uncover for you a secret thing, a secret of the gods. Let me tell you, there is a plant. Its roots go deep. Its spike will prick your hand. But if you get your hands on that plant, you'll have everlasting life. So while you can't necessarily say lavender is going to give you, you know, everlasting life, it can reduce your stress. It can help you to sleep well and feel more relaxed, which of course, quality of life is very important. Moving on now to ancient Persia and a little beyond that. In addition to these uses from ancient Mesopotamia, which were passed on through the region, it was also used to disinfect hospitals and sick rooms. And the 17th century Persian medical text called lavender the broom of the brain, because it was believed that using lavender would sweep away impurities in your brain, which I think is pretty interesting. On a different note, what we know about neuroscience today and the function of sleep, right? When we enter into a deep sleep, our brains actually are being cleared and cleaned of a lot of detritus that accumulates over the course of a day. So this concept of a broom of the brain, you know, in 17th century Persia, now kind of sees an interesting reflection in modern science today. Anyway, I love neuroscience. I think it's cool. And just in general, in Iran, traditional Iranian medicine, lavender has a ton of uses, including for neurological, digestive, and respiratory issues. And it's also referred to just kind of as a general tonic for health. Ancient Egypt, of course, is passing on this sort of body of lavender knowledge from these previous earlier civilizations. So they're continuing to use it for stress relief, for sleep, for cleansing, for personal fragrance. Of course, in Egypt, they were very, very appreciative of fragrance. Lavender featured in their perfume, in their incense, and also they're going to put their own cultural spin on it, right? In cosmetics. So if you think to some of the hieroglyphic art that we've seen with the ancient Egyptians wearing sort of the costume wigs and the eyeliner and other cosmetics, one of the unique things they did is, this is pretty large for demonstration purposes, but this is some beeswax from our local bee maker, Dan Savino. And what the ancient Egyptians would do is they would blend beeswax and lavender to kind of create this highly perfumed wax. A smaller wafer than this, but they would actually put it on their heads like so, and then put the wig on top of this lavender beeswax melt. And as the warmth from their scalp sort of softened the beeswax, it released the volatile oils from the lavender and kind of enveloped their heads in this sort of halo of lavender, which sounds delightful on one hand, but incredibly sticky and, and sweaty on the other. Lavender also featured as a mummification ingredient, and the image on this slide is a a colorized, I was going to say colorified, that's not even a word, a colorized image of King Tut's tomb. And so we know that mummification was very important. Lavender was used in this process. And after 3,000 years of being closed up, when King Tut's tomb was opened in 1922, with all of the things inside that ostensibly you would need for the afterlife, right? Per ancient Egyptian belief systems, guess what was found in King Tut's tomb? Lavender. And interestingly enough, it was still fragrant. So this kind of speaks to the potency of lavender all those years later. Moving on to ancient and classical Greece, we have that same body of knowledge now being passed on a little north and east across the Mediterranean, right? Some texts, ancient Greek and classical Greek texts, will refer to lavender as nardus or nard. It's said to have originated from the Syrian city of Narda on the Euphrates River. And lavender was also used in Greek medicine, and it figured into their medicinal theory of the four humors in the body that corresponded to the four elements out in the world. And so here's a quote from a Greek philosopher, Diogenes, and his use of lavender. So he preferred to anoint his feet with lavender rather than his head like the Egyptians. He said, when you anoint your head with perfume, it flies away in the air and birds only get the benefit of it. Whilst if I rub it on my lower limbs, it envelops my whole body and gratefully ascends to my nose. So Greek philosophy wasn't all about, you know, the meaning of life and deep things. It also could be how you preferred to apply your personal fragrance. And of course, you can't have the Greeks without the Romans following them you know, really following in their footsteps. So taking this, again, this body of knowledge now and heading west, the European and down the Italian peninsula now, and using it for the same purposes all along, the sleep, the stress relief, the personal fragrance, the cleansing, also the medicinal uses of being antimicrobial, antibacterial. In fact, in ancient Rome, lavender was so important and was used for so many different things that Roman soldiers actually carried it in their kit as they marched, particularly for the healing purposes. We know, of course, and our imaginations are ignited by the stories of ancient Romans having gladiator battles, right? And we know that not only did humans fight in ancient Rome, but they would quite often get exotic animals from further reaches of the Roman Empire, bring them back, the animals would fight as well. But of course, when the animals aren't fighting, you want them to be calm in the cages. And supposedly lavender was used to help keep these lions and tigers calm between these battles that they were fighting. Also in this era, you have probably one of the most famous women in history, Cleopatra. And Cleopatra was said to have preferred lavender above all as her personal fragrance. And so, of course, you think of all these stories of Cleopatra being this beautiful, intelligent, compelling, and seductive woman. Maybe lavender was giving her a little help, I don't know. But it also figures into the folklore around her death as well. Supposedly, Cleopatra died because she was bitten by an asp, a highly venomous snake. And supposedly, folklore tells us that the asp was in a lavender bush. And because it was making its habitat here, what happened was you had this sort of supply and demand, I guess, economics in ancient Rome. You had this item that everyone wanted for all of these practical and personal uses, but it then became dangerous because people started to believe that these venomous snakes lived in these lavender bushes. So it became very expensive. You would have to pay at this time 100 Roman denarii for 1 pound of lavender. That would be the same amount of money as an ancient Roman you would pay for 10 pounds of bread or 10 liters of table wine. So it was definitely a desirable good. And history tells us too that as the ancient Romans moved across the Mediterranean and further afield, that when they conquered southern Britain, that was when lavender was originally brought to the UK, which of course now English lavender is a very well-known variety of lavender, and the UK has a big lavender growing industry. Dioscorides, who was a Greek physician to the Romans, described lavender, like sort of doing some botanical study, as an herb with a slender twigs, having hair like thyme, yet longer leaved and sharp in ye taste, and somewhat bitterish, but ye decoction of it is good for ye griefs and ye thorax. So again, that sort of ancient medicinal knowledge. And lavender started to travel, so it didn't just primarily hang around the Mediterranean and Europe, although most of the information out there is about lavender and Europe. I really tried to dig hard and look for other cultures, but it's hard to find. But I did find that lavender was considered essential in Northern Africa. And one source that I found said that Libyans make use of it for washing their bodies, nor ever leave their houses of a morning until purified by a decoction of the plant. And in Asian traditional medicine, lavender, when it eventually made its way to China, it got wrapped up in these traditions and was used for this overall sort of cooling or relaxing effect. Lavender is believed to nourish your yin energy, which is the more calming, more feminine energy. And lavender is also believed to activate your ki, so sort of your life force, your mojo, right? Lavender helps you to be relaxed, but to have energy, so it brings balance. And in India, it was used for psychiatric purposes, and eventually those purposes spread to Tibet, and the Tibetans put their own twist on it by using it for the same reasons, but with a different mode of delivery, edible ointment or medicinal butter. Which I don't know about you, but I think I'd probably put some lavender butter on my toast. No matter how I was feeling, I think that sounds pretty good. And even today, lavender is still used in Tibetan Buddhist medicine, primarily for mental imbalances. So it calms everything down and brings needed balance. Lavender also features in some Judeo-Christian folk beliefs, as well as some actual, references in the canon and outside of the canon. And please know that I'm trying to word this in a way that's respectful to people's beliefs, and still noting that a lot of this information around lavender in general is a lot of folk beliefs. So here are some that have showed up officially and not officially. Quite frequently throughout the Bible, lavender is referred to as spikenard. So if you see a reference in the Bible to spikenard or sometimes nard, they're talking about lavender. Some say that when Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, they were said to have taken lavender with them. So if you think about all the purposes and uses for this plant, that was a wise choice. Some stories also say that lavender originally did not have a scent. It was only after Mary laid baby Jesus's clothes over a lavender bush to dry that the plant forever after had this wonderful fragrance, sort of as a divine blessing, right? Not in the official books of the Bible, but an apocryphal story, it said that Judith wore perfume blended with lavender to seduce Holofernes before beheading him. And if you don't know this story, you can just Google it. It has inspired so many artists throughout history, from Caravaggio to Gustav Klimt. The story of this brave heroine dispatching this frankly disgusting man with the help of some lavender. Mary Magdalene, a famous biblical story, she, can see in this painting on the slide, she anointed Jesus's feet with costly oils, the best of the best, and it was said to have contained lavender oil. And some other stories, which of course can't be confirmed, but are part of these folk beliefs. It was said that when infant Jesus was born, he was washed and cleansed with lavender. And it was also said after his death that his body was anointed after his crucifixion. And some Christians believe also that lavender crosses can help protect from evil. So taking sort of I'm going to snip a stem, I'm going to snip another stem. So imagine not just two little wimpy stems, but two bunches, right? So kind of making a wreath out of lavender. but a cross-shaped wreath, and then either putting it on your front door or by your front door, or even wearing it as a corsage or a boutonniere would help ward off evil. So some really interesting beliefs. This brings us to the European Middle Ages, and you saw lavender continuing to be used for these medicinal and hygienic purposes. Lavender was grown in monastery physic gardens. We also see it being referred to as lafont and lavandule in some texts of the time. And a really cool historical figure, Hildegard von Bingen, noted that you should cook lavender with wine or lavender with honey and water. And if you drink it lukewarm, it will alleviate pains in your liver and your lungs and steam in your chest. She also noted that lavender wine would provide someone with pure knowledge and a clear understanding. So here again, we can see the duality of the plant, right? For like real physical complaints, specific ones, as well as sort of more rarefied, more spiritual purposes. And I'm watching my time, so I might zip through some of these, but never fear, it will be on YouTube. And really in the Middle Ages, this is where we start to see this real duality of the plant coming out, that it was something that was sort of dangerous or seductive, kind of earthy, and desirable and sort of heavenly. And in fact, at this time, you know, women whose job it was to do laundry, so to clean people's clothes, to clean people's linens, sometimes were also making money different ways in the sheets, shall we say. And sometimes these women were referred to as lavenders. And so this lavender term came to refer to not only a woman who would do the wash for you, but also a woman who was a prostitute. So here's this strange double meaning at this time. Lavender also figures into the plague, the sort of original bubonic plague from this era. We see various towns who were trying to purify the air. They had this medicinal belief of miasma, that it was bad air causing the plague. And so they thought if they would put these bonfires in their city squares and burn them, it would help purify the air. And lavender was always one of the herbs that was burned. People were also recommended, where did I put my little lavender? Okay, that you could tie a bundle of lavender to each of your wrists to protect you from the plague. There's also a cool story about Four Thieves vinegar, which you can look it up now on the internet. There's a bunch of different recipes. You can also buy it already made. But generally, every concoction involves lavender. Supposedly, there were four thieves who decided to take advantage of plague victims. And if someone was sick or dying from the plague, of course, they couldn't defend themselves. They couldn't take care of their possessions. So they would target plague victims. But how could they do this without, contracting the plague themselves? It's said that they came up with this Four Thieves vinegar concoction, and they would wash their hands and wash with it, and that would protect them from the plague. And that they could also wash anything that they had stolen from someone's house in order to remove the plague. Who knows if this is true or not? It's a very interesting story. Some other stories around Four Thieves vinegar say that they got caught stealing from plague victims' houses, and as a punishment, they were sentenced to bury plague victims, which is not a fun job and very dangerous. And it was said in this version that they came up with Four Thieves vinegar to clean up with, to protect them when burying these plague victims. Can we confirm these things? No, of course not. But we can confirm that we know now that lavender actually repels fleas. And we know that this is one of the mechanisms that spread the plague was, the rats and the human fleas, which would then, spread it to the human vectors. So what seems like a fanciful story actually does have some scientific merit. Here, this quote, you see a little more of this duality of the term lavender. Thou shalt be my lavender to wash and clean all my gear. our 2 beds will be set without any let. The Renaissance, of course, was a time of great productivity and creativity and invention in Europe, and lavender figured prominently in it as well. You saw the same body of knowledge and uses of lavender being carried on throughout the Renaissance, both for royalty and for commoners. It was mentioned here by Dr. Nicholas Culpeper for its calming properties, as well as being a well-known male aphrodisiac. And even Shakespeare mentions it in Winter's Tale as it being an herb given to men of middle age. So supposedly, I suppose, as your heat in your body is cooling down as you get older, your passions are maybe a little less hot, that lavender can sort of reignite some of those flames from your youth. Another sort of medical text from the time recommends lavender for snake bites, for mad dogs, for any venomous creatures, and if you have issues with hysteria, and so on and so forth. So lots of uses of lavender. Glove makers in Grasse, France, avoided cholera, as it turns out. They would quite often make perfumed gloves. If you think about the frequency with which people bathed back then, it was probably a good thing you had all the perfume you could get. And it was noticed that these glove makers that were routinely using lavender did not get cholera. And as it turns out, lavender is antibacterial and antimicrobial, and in high doses, like somebody who's working with it at their workplace, it does kill these cholera bacteria. And Queen Elizabeth I, you see her here in the slide, she was a huge fan of lavender. She did suffer from migraines and would relieve her migraines with a lavender tea. In addition, she enjoyed it as a perfume, and she encouraged expansion of lavender farming in England. Across the channel, we have Louis XIV, the Sun King, and he was said to carry lavender in his pockets. Charles IV of France had his furniture in his salon stuffed with lavender. Seems like a great idea. And during the Renaissance, lavender was said to be the symbol of true love in sort of the flower languages, kind of like the red rose today. Lavender also quite frequently featured in wedding bouquets because it was believed to bring good fortune and harmony in marriage. It was also used for culinary purposes, and keep in mind the Renaissance palate is very different from our modern palate. A lot of highly spiced stuff for a variety of reasons we don't have the time to get into tonight, but it was used in jams, jellies, sweets, fruit pies, vinegars, stews, stocks, game meats, and marinades. So a lot of uses for lavender. Here, a little poem talking about the romances of lavender. Lavender is for love's true, which evermore be fain, desiring always to have some pleasure for their pain. And when that they obtained, have the love they require, then have they all their perfect joy, and quenched is the fire. Now, I'm going to do a little show and tell with you. When we think of the Renaissance, we think of the original Renaissance man, right? Leonardo da Vinci, right? He was an artist, a 2D artist, a sculptor, a writer, an inventor, so on and so forth, an architect. How did he get all this inspiration? Well, maybe we could get some inspiration like Da Vinci from this unique fragrance that includes lavender. And so I found this source that said to make a perfume, take some rose water. This is rose water, which you can get at Wegmans. You can get it, obviously you can get anything on Amazon, but your typical Middle Eastern or Indian groceries often have rose water. So Da Vinci advises us to make a perfume, take some rose water. I'm going to pour some in my hands. Let me tilt it down a little. Okay, wash your hands in it. So I'm washing my hands with the rose water, and I do wish I had smell-o-vision for you right now. Okay, and next he says to take a lavender flower and rub it with your palms, and you will achieve the desired effect. So here I have the lavender, and I'm rubbing it, and it's mingling with the rose water, and my hands are warming up and crushing the essential oils in the flower. So now, I mean, I can't guarantee that this is going to make you a genius like Da Vinci, but it'll make you feel like you're on cloud nine. And when I've done this talk in the past at Soleado Lavender Farm, we go out in the field and we actually do this, and it's so lovely. Highly recommend. Get yourself some rose water. The other thing which we should talk about before we go on, of course, in these times now with COVID and here in modern society, who would have thought we'd be worried about physical distancing and wearing masks? But hey, we see here this traditional costume of a plague doctor. And this originated as a specialized uniform meant to protect the doctor. Based on this miasma theory, again, right, the germs are in the air, it's bad air that we're breathing in, causing an imbalance in those humors in the body. And so it consisted of this long waxed overcoat, quite often connected pants and boots, also often frequently a leather hat and gloves, and a cane for contactless examinations and for physical distancing, which I think is just a nice way to say to keep people away from you. Maybe we need some canes today, right? And of course, the part that ties into lavender is the mask with this distinctive beak, right? And the reason why this mask has, you know, the glass lenses to protect the eyes and the beak, the hollow beak would be stuffed with a blend of something called theriac. This was a fermented blend of 55 different ingredients that included various herbs, straw, and spices that were said to filter and protect the air the physician was breathing in as he worked with these plague victims. And of course, lavender was one of the ingredients in this theriac mixture. Lavender was also brought to the earliest, origins of the United States. It was one of the first herbs that was imported here with settlers because of all of its uses. And, you know, quite frequently, people would have a kitchen garden out their back door for different things that were of practical household use. And quite often, lavender would be one of those plants in those backdoor kitchen gardens. The earliest records we have of lavender being grown commercially in the United States is by a sect of Quakers. And so if you think about what we know about Quaker beliefs around pacifism and peace, that lavender seems like really an ideal plant given its calming and peaceful properties, right? A famous song, whoops, I went past it, about lavender, and this is a folk song or nursery rhyme. It dates back to the Renaissance, but the later versions, they all sound wholesome at the beginning, and then like the last line or two gets a little bit PG, shall we say? So it's kind of interesting to think about it being a nursery rhyme, but I'll read you the 1805 version there. Lavender blue and rosemary green, when I am king, you shall be queen. Call up my maids at 4 o'clock, some to the wheel and some to the rock, some to make hay and some to shear corn, and you and I will keep the bed warm. Woo! And this song most recently popped up, I think it was maybe 2017, Disney came out with a live action Cinderella. I'm going to try to play it for you, and I'm hoping it shows up. If it doesn't, please say something. Let's see if it comes up or not. Can you see the YouTube window? Thumbs up. Can you see the YouTube window? No? Okay. Let me change the screen sharing that I'm doing because right now I'm sharing the PowerPoint. I think I have to share my desktop. So give me 1 second. I'm just going to play a little bit of the song. Let's see, new share, desktop. Hopefully I don't kick us all out of here. Okay, now can you see my YouTube? Okay, now the $1,000,000 question is, will you be able to hear it? Let's see. Lavender's lady, lavender's green. When you are king, dilly dilly, I'll be your queen. Who told you so, dilly dilly? Who told you so? 'Twas my own heart, dilly dilly, that told me so. Okay, now I'm going to try to switch you back to my PowerPoint. Oh boy, hopefully this works. Cross your fingers for me. Let's see if I turn it to this. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint again? Okay. I tried this at work last week for a presentation I was giving and it didn't work. So I'm so glad it worked this week. So that brings us to the Victorian era. Newsflash, lavender was a huge deal in the Victorian era. And part of this, of course, is because of Queen Victoria. Everyone loved the Queen and wanted to do what the Queen was doing and what they were doing at the palace. She loved it so much, she had her own official purveyor, Miss Sarah Sproles, and lavender was used throughout the palace in cleaning products. It was planted on the palace grounds, and so it became a huge trend in society. Somewhat, sometimes not in such refined ways. It was very popular to have these small sachets that were manufactured specifically for young women to place in their cleavage so that the scent of the lavender would hopefully attract a suitable lover. And I really love this quote. Mark Twain seems to get so many quotes attributed to him that can't actually be confirmed, but I'm going to leave it anyway. But I love the spirit behind it, and that's: forgiveness is the scent that lavender gives out when you tread on it. What a lovely, lovely thought. I like that. Forgiveness is the scent that lavender gives out when you tread on it. This brings us up to the 20th century. Prior to the World Wars, you know, a lot of Europe was still very rustic, and lavender was a big crop because of a variety of uses. And you can see here this image, which I got from the Lavender Museum website from Provence, shows a traveling lavender still. And so someone, a craftsperson, would travel from small village to, you know, little mountain hamlets and would set up the still in town, and the peasants would harvest their lavender and they would bring it to market to be used at this, this traveling still into oil. However, the 20th century also brought some sad news for lavender, and that is that its popularity really waned because, like all trends, people get so sick of a trend, they don't want anything to do with it for a while after, right? And so people started to sort of associate lavender with an old lady fragrance. But we did see it coming back a bit for medicinal purposes in World War I and World War II, when industrial cleaners and medicines were in short supply. And so it could be used for these antimicrobial properties, to speed healing, and also to clean operating rooms, and for nurses and doctors to use as well. But other than that, by the mid-20th century, lavender really hit a low point. You know, we had this post-war prosperity, we had this post-war industrialization where everybody was really enjoying things being mechanized, things being sped up, things being processed. Like, it was sort of this space age romance, right? So nobody wanted anything to do with this old fusty dusty plant. And so it wasn't until a little bit past that point where we saw a democratization in air travel, so international travel, people going to different places in the world, particularly Americans, going to places that had this sort of culture that had used lavender for years. the resurgence of small farms that were growing things other than just commodity crops, and just a generalized increase in natural remedies kind of caused a lavender renaissance in the later half of the 20th century. Which brings us to today. Today, it's the most popular essential oil in the world for all of the reasons that we've heard about tonight, stretching back to really the dawn of mankind. In addition, it's also a culinary trend. You see lavender featured in savory dishes, in drinks, in desserts. You can see there in the lower corner a nice latte with lavender. I actually make a lavender latte as a treat to myself every Friday morning. I just have a French press with my coffee, and I got this dried lavender at Penzeys. You do want to make sure if you're going to eat lavender that it is culinary lavender. Don't go to Michael's and get potpourri. It's not going to end well. But I just put it in my French press, about like a heaping teaspoon for 2 cups of coffee, and just make my latte as usual. It's a delightful twist. Lavender flavor is not for everybody. Some people will dislike it and say it tastes like soap, but you may like to try it for something different. It also features prominently in global pop culture these days. You can see the TV flyer there with the couple with the lavender field behind them. It's this show called Lavender, which was a runaway hit in Taiwan and really throughout Asia. It's caused this sort of lavender madness in Asia, this love for the plant and for the scent. And you see there also the late great musician Prince, who loved all things purple, including lavender. And it was said that lavender was his personal fragrance. And many of his friends said that you could actually smell him entering a room before you actually saw him because of the lavender that he enjoyed. And even more recently with COVID and so many of us having challenges with stress and anxiety and sleep, lavender essential oils and lavender is an ingredient in things like candles and bath salts and lotions. It is really skyrocketed for those reasons. I'm getting close on time. I'm watching, don't worry. Quick review of some of the lavender folklore, which still persists in some places. It is said that if you slip lavender under a man's pillow, he will propose to you the next day. There's also a belief that if you sip lavender tea on St. Luke's Day, and you'll dream of your true love that evening. But you have to drink the tea and then say, St. Luke, be kind to me. In my dreams, let my true love see. Also, another Saint's Day, St. John's Day bonfires in Spain and Portugal would include lavender thrown into the fire, said to ward off evil and bring good fortune. You see many different cultures and countries believe it's good luck to have lavender growing in your garden, especially by your front door. The plant is also believed to be a favorite of fairy folk. And in some cultures, it was quite often women in childbirth were given little bouquets of lavender to hold. So again, if you think about the stress relieving properties and the sort of feeling the fragrance gives you, that would be a good choice. And in southern Italy, where they have concerns about malocchio, the evil eye, boutonnieres of lavender are said to ward off that evil eye. A lot of fanciful ideas and details and uses throughout history, but as it turns out, modern science actually affirms a lot of these. And so again, getting to the science of the lavender a little bit, its strong fragrance is derived from these tiny hairs that are embedded with oil glands, and these little hairs are all over the flowers, the leaves, and the stems. So actually, lavender, even if you were to just take, let me break off a little piece. Here you can see the base. This is all stem, no flower. Even if you were to just kind of mush the leaves and the stem, you would still get that lovely fragrance. And it's due to those little hairs. And what happens is these hairs release these volatile aromatic oils, which then hit our nasal membranes, which are very sensitive and sends information directly to our brain. And lavender contains these stress-reducing chemicals, linalool and linaloyl acetate, also found in citrus fruits and neroli. So there's a lot of cool plant chemistry there. If you're interested in that stuff, look it up. Research backs it up. In 1930s, there was a French chemist who burned his hand really badly in the lab, and he applied lavender oil to the burn, and it healed so quickly and so well, he decided to then start researching lavender specifically. And he ended up writing a book called Aromathérapie, les huiles essentielles, and I'm going to end there with my French accent. And basically what he did was he coined the term or the concept of aromatherapy, right? And all thanks to lavender and its healing properties. And research does support its historic uses around insomnia, anxiety, stress, circulation, hair loss. I'm not going to read the whole list because time is ticking. And it also has been proven to be antibacterial. In high doses, it does eliminate certain kinds of disease-causing bacteria. Please note, I'm not telling you, don't go to the doctor or don't use traditional medicine, use essential oils. That's not what I'm telling you. It's just interesting how some of these ancient uses turn out to be not just fanciful ideas, but real science. So in closure, you know, here we are thousands of years later, living in modern America. Here we are having this presentation together. None of us are in the same room over our computers. It's wild. It's amazing. Yet we still enjoy lavender for its physical and mental benefits, for its aesthetics, its flavor, and its fragrance. And when we use these things, we're linked to all of this history across cultures, beyond borders. And really, when we look at the plant, we smell it, we taste it, it's a reminder that we really are unified in humanity. No matter our personal beliefs or where we're from, we are connected in our desire for peace, for love, for health, and for a good night's rest. Thank you. So real quick, here's some resources to explore. There's the link to that lavender museum in Provence. Don't worry, it is an English website. A little bit of cool stuff. There's a US Lavender Growers Association with some resources. There's the link to Soleado, which is nearby. There is traditionally, not in COVID era probably, a Maryland Lavender Festival right up in Frederick County. There is another lavender farm in Frederick County called Blue Dreams USA. And out in Western Maryland, if you find yourself going out that way, there's a Deep Creek Lavender Farm. So I just want to say once again, thank you for attending this. I hope you enjoyed it. You can check out my website there, and you can sign up my email list if you want to stay updated when I do other events. You can also read some of my blog posts. I have a new one up today about cheese and the world of cheese. And upcoming in December, I will be doing a charity cheese tasting to benefit the Up County Prevention Network here in Poolesville. So if you like cheese, stay tuned.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I loved your presentation. I learned so much.
Yay.
I've got some questions in the chat for you.
Okay, great.
Can you grow lavender year-round, indoor or outdoor?
Great question. So lavender can be grown year-round here in Maryland. It is a little bit of a fussy plant. So you'll want to make sure that you buy a plant from somewhere local because you're going to get the variety that can tough out our winters. That being said, it is a relative of rosemary. So if you've ever grown rosemary before, you want similar conditions. You don't want to mulch up around the plant because what's going to happen is, let me see, I think I got all the gross stuff off the bottom. It'll get all wilty at the bottom if it gets too much moisture, and it can actually kill the plant. Keep in mind where it's originally from, right? It's from the Mediterranean, so think hot and dry. So you don't want to mush it with mulch or put it anywhere it's not going to get a lot of sun. As far as growing it indoors, I haven't tried that. I would guess it'd probably be, again, like growing rosemary indoors. Without that sunlight and that heat, it's probably going to be a little anemic, and might not get enough sun. But you can always try. That's the good thing about gardening.
Another question is, how do you shop for or identify the best lavender products to buy?
That's a good question. There's been a lot of attention lately, and even an entire series on Netflix devoted to food fakes and just, you know, fake agricultural products in general. So what I would tell you is, if you're looking to use lavender, particularly for a medicinal purpose, maybe, or maybe you're very sensitive to certain ingredients, you want to make sure it's the real deal, I would tell you to buy it from a local lavender farm, or someone that you personally know. So Soleado, like I said, they're nearby. They're great people. It's a family business, and they're not physically open, but they do have an online shop, and they have the oil and candles and lotion and what I think is the best chapstick in the world.
Awesome. Any more questions? Feel free to unmute and ask questions if you have them, or send them in the chat to me, or just in the general chat.
Christine, you said earlier that there were, you know, a lot of different varieties. I have purchased a lot of lavender, and it
Sorry.
doesn't, it, maybe I'm just buying the wrong varieties, but it's not what I consider lavender. It's not what I'm seeing in your pictures, but it's always marked lavender, you know, in the nurseries.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any particular thing that I should be looking for when I buy?
Well, there are 3 different kinds of lavender primarily that you're going to see in most nurseries. And they're all generally going to be that blue or the purple. But there's the Spanish, the French, and the English. And so you are probably getting one of those varieties when you have in mind a different variety. This one that I have, this is the English lavender. If I remember correctly, I always get them mixed up, and I knew I should have put a picture in the presentation tonight. It's either the French lavender or the Spanish lavender that looks really funky. It's like a fat flower bud, and it looks like it has like a crazy party hat on. Like the petals kind of stick out the top. So that might be the one that you're getting. But they can look very different.
And I obviously must not have a green thumb and must not be treating it appropriately, because they keep telling me it's a perennial and it keeps dying over the winter.
So what you might want to do is, and good news for people that aren't green thumbs, it's actually fairly easy to grow once you find a good spot for it. So you have to find a spot, again, what is the most Mediterranean spot in your yard? So somewhere that gets full sun, that's not in a low spot, that's going to collect a lot of moisture. And here in Poolesville, you know, we have, in Poolesville area, we have a lot of clay in our soil that holds moisture in. So we have to be careful about that. Again, not mulching around it. Something else that can kill it during the winter are these cold winds, because the cold winds are very drying. So if you can find a location in your yard that's a little sheltered, like for example, maybe it's along the side of your house, right? Because the side of your house is going to retain some heat and bounce it back onto the plant, as well as blocking winds from one side, or even planting it somewhere where there are taller plants that are sort of serving as a windbreak. Mm-hmm. I've also seen stuff online for like rosemary too, or even like figs, suggesting that you can actually cover or wrap the plant like with burlap during the winter. I've not personally tried that, but it could be something you could experiment with.
I'm going to keep trying.
Yeah, don't give up, because once you find a good spot, it should stick around a while. And Soleado does some good workshops. I think sometimes they post stuff on their social media about how to trim lavender. Okay. And that can be something else that can help you keep the plant healthy and vibrant.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
So is it best to plant it in the spring before the growing season?
What I would tell you is right now, we are getting a little cold at night, and it is generally anything that you're planting now should be something that's a little more cold hardy, because you want the plants that are growing now to be able to put out, the new plants I should say, to put out some roots before winter really hits. And a plant like lavender that enjoys the heat, it's gonna mope if you plant it right now, right? Because the soil is starting to get cold, the nights are starting to get cold. It may not put out enough roots to survive the winter. So even though you may be very motivated by this talk tonight, I would tell you probably wait until the spring to plant any new lavender.
Okay. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Any more questions?
I'm happy to stick around.
All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, then I'll remind you that this will be available soon on our YouTube and to check out our website for some more upcoming events. But thank you so much, Professor, for your amazing presentation tonight.
You're welcome. It was a lot of fun, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. Sorry I rushed it a little bit, but I was trying to watch my time.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care, everyone.